Kadosh, Boker Or, Daf Yomi, Masechet Avodah Zarah Daf, Kavdaled Amud Aleph 24A1. We're just going to start again on 23B, Kavgim Amud Bet on the bottom, where we had a question that how could you tell me that whenever it says Vichuli, it means, for example, that it has to be only from a Jew and not a non-Jew? Because if you're going to tell me, as we said, that if it's Vichuli Faraduma, it means you could only buy a Paraduma from the Jew and not from the non-Jew. So says the Gemara, ask the Gemara, you could only take a donation, right? And it says Vichuli. So Hachanami, you're going to tell me that it's only from Bnei Yisrael Yakichu, that you could only take it from a Jew and not from a non-Jew. Now you're going to tell me yes. They asked Rabbi Eliezer, Ad hechan kibud avayim. Until where, when, what? We want to know what is kibud avayim. Yeah, until where? Amar lahem, he told them, listen to this, something incredible. Tzeur me'asa oved kochavim echad. Look what an oved kochavim did le'aviv, to his father in Ashkelon. V'dama ben netina shemo, his name was Dama ben netina. Pam achat bikshu mimenu avanim la'efod. Do you know they wanted avanim for the ephod, precious stones for the ephod? Remember, the ephod was the breastplate that went only on the Kohen Hagadol Me'echav, not on a regular Kohen. A Kohen Hagadol Me'echav. Yeah, so he comes and he says they wanted beautiful stones. So what happens? He comes and it says B'shishim ribo schar. He was able to make 600,000 dinare zahav. You know what that is? 600,000 dinare zahav for those precious stones. Rav Kahana taught it wasn't shishim ribo, shmonim ribo, which is 800,000. Okay? Vayu maftechot, where's the keys? Vayu maftechot munachot tacha menashotov shel aviv. Where were the keys? The keys were underneath the pillow of his father. Meaning they were locked up in a safe, and they were underneath the pillow of his father. Velot ziaro, he didn't wake him up. Now, Ribono Shel Olam, well, you're not waking him up. It's 800,000 or 600,000, golden coins. That's a lot of money. He didn't wake him up. So therefore, the question is, how are you going to come and you're going to tell me that whenever it says Vichuelecha, it means that it has to be that you're purchasing from a Jew and not from a non-Jew, and therefore the Paraduma could only come from a Jew and not from a non-Jew. It also says Vichuelecha here. And here it's mashma, right? Of course, katuv. Yeah. So says the Gemara, answers the Gemara, Avne Shoham hifsika inyan. Meaning there was no vav, there was no continuation, there was a pasek, right? There was without vav achibur, and therefore the avanim tovot could come from the oved kochavim. It says the bera bnei Yisrael v'yichuli teruma. Right? And then it says, Vezot teruma no, which means all of them with Vav Chibur. So we learned they're all mechubarim. So therefore they're only taken from Yisrael. But in Pasuk Zayin, all of a sudden it says, Avne Shoham Vavne Miluim Le'efov Choshen. And there it doesn't say Vav. So since the meaning, there it says, Vezot teruma Zahav, Vachesef, Unchoshet, Utchelet, Ve'argaman, Ve'tolat Shani, Ve'shesh, Ve'izi. Kulam Vav Chibur. So all the things which have the Vav Chibur, which means that they're all connected, right? That's in the footnote 2. Yeah, he says all the things which are connected, Kulam Davka Miyudi, Davka Miyisrael, Lo Migoy. But since Avnei Shoham there's a pasek and there's no Vav, so therefore you could get it from anyone that you want. So says the Gemara, Ve'ha Ve'avnei Miluim Ketif. Yeah, but it's written there, Ve'avnei Miluim, right? So the Hadar Arveh. So it mixed everything together again. Ve'od kashya, ve'od ketani seifa. And with another question we learned in the seifa, the shana acheret, the next year, nolda lo paraduma bedro. There was a paraduma. So Dama Benetina, he had a paraduma that was born in his flock. Nichnesu chachmei Yisrael etzlo. So chachmei Yisrael came in to buy the paraduma. Amar lahem, he told them, Yodea ani bachem, I know. I could ask you anything I want in the world. I know I could ask you any amount of money that I want in the world, and you'll give it to me. Atem notnim li. Achshav, now, I only want the money that I lost because of my father. Right? Which means that he understood that the paraduma was actually a reward that he was mechabed, right? His father, right? So therefore, he didn't want to take the schar mitzvot to this world. No, ela ba'olam haba. So therefore, he only wanted that which he lost because of the mitzvah, but not revach nosaf. Something incredible, yeah. So it's a whole question here in the footnote about why dafka him or whatever, but it's something incredible. So you see from here, he was mechabed et abba shelo. Yeah, you're looking up. Yeah, he was mamash mechabed et abba shelo ad kedei kach, right? That he went, yeah, and he was mamash 100%. You see, lo letzayer et abba shelo, was mechabed et abba shelo. Yeah. So what happens? So therefore, he didn't want to wake him up. So because of that, all of a sudden now they're getting a paraduma. So therefore, what are you going to say? Here's a proof that you could even get a paraduma from an oved kochavim. You told me. Well, that's what we're asking. Yeah. So answers the Gemara. Hatam al yedei tagarei Yisrael zavun. The Chachamim, they bought it through Socharim Yisrael, meaning the Jew was a metavech. He was the intermediary, the middleman. The middleman, right, was the Jew. So since the middleman was a Jew, that's why they were able to get it from the Jew. They weren't getting it directly from the Goy. Right? Now, obviously, right, this is, because he wanted to say it in another reason. So he says, so 1 second. First of all, we were trying to prove that technically speaking, you could get it directly from the Goy. We had to answer up. Yeah, I was talking about that there was an intermediary, everything that you want. But technically speaking, it was mashma that you don't have to. But now we have another question. The other question is going to be 1 second, 1 second. Why don't we choshesh for Reviyah? We said that the Oved Kochavim will come, and we're going to suspect that maybe there's going to be a problem is done with the animal. So he says, we learned in the Brayta, they went and they did get a paraduma, and they got the paraduma from an Oved Kochavim. What was his name? Dama Menetina. Some people say Ramatz Shemo. His name was Ramatz. But whichever one is, what was his name, whether it's Damar or Ramatz, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they got it from Oved Kochavim. So Eliezer says, Eliezer, Misham Raya, is that a proof? Yisrael ayu mishamrim ota misha shenolda. The Yisrael were watching over it from the time that it was born. Meaning the second that the paraduma was born, they already went and they were trying to make sure that nothing bad would happen to the paraduma. So they had to make sure that it's not going to be worked, that it's not going to be they're watching over it. So therefore, we're not going to suspect that the Oved Kochavim did anything. So answers the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer tarte itle. Rabbi Eliezer holds two different reasons why it's a sur to take the paraduma from the goy. Number one, because of kicha, right? Vichu, that whenever it says vichu kicha, it always means mibnei Yisrael and not from, right, the goyim, just like the drasha of Shila. Number two, the chayishnami also the reviyah, for two different reasons. So therefore, only when you have two different reasons, number one is being bought through an intermediary, which is a mitavech, and number two, that the Yisrael is watching over it from the beginning to make sure that it's not going to be done in Reviyah, so therefore there's not going to be a problem. Okay? So says the Brayta, Amar Mon, Yisrael ayu mishamnim otam misha shenolda, right? So we already said to do the paraduma dabama mentina, the Yisrael was watching over it the entire time from the time that it was born. So ask the Gemara, maybe it was already Ravia, the mother, when she was pregnant. The Amar Rava, but Rava says, Vlada nogachat asura. He uvlada nakhu. When you have a vlad of a be'ema, which was nogachat, and it killed somebody. So you're not allowed to bring that animal or the child as a korban. Why? Because he uvlada nakhu. It was her and the child, meaning even though the child was still in the stomach, right? But still, it's considered that kilu both of them did it together. Uvlada nirbat is also asura lakrava. Why? He uvlada nirbu. So what does it help now to watch over the paraduma that there was not done reviyah? What does that help? At the end of the day, you still have the suspicion of what? Of what we mentioned over here, that it was nirba the mother. So answers the Gemara, Eima, I'm going to say, Yisalim shamnim otam isha shenotzra. Right? He says from the time that the animal was formed, right? They were watching over the mother. I guess they know when it's pregnant. Yeah. So he says, even though it says here, Rega Yitzirat Avlad and Yodua, Minastam, the Kavanah is that they started watching over it from the time that it was Nizdavga. Meaning the second that there was relations, doesn't matter, they would watch over them. Yeah? So says the Gemara, so they would come and they would start watching over the mother from the time that immediately that it was going to be like this. So V'neichush Dilma Revuah Le'ima Meikara. Says, okay, but what happens if he already did it to the mother before she became pregnant? Right? Because you just answered no. So maybe they had relations, and from the relations onward, you started watching over the animal. Yeah, but maybe he did it 5 years ago. Maybe he did it well. How do you know? Titznan. Anything which is pasul to the mizbeach. So, for example, be'emash nilbeah, vladotehen, which come afterwards, is going to be mutarin lakrava. We learned on this. Rabbi Eliezer said. So, according to Shittat Rabbi Eliezer, the second that there was a reviyah beforehand, it's going to be asur. So even if it was nirbeah lifnei 5 shanim, and only now it becomes pregnant, and now somehow magically it's paraduma, and you know that, and everything, that doesn't matter. It's already pasul. Rabbi Eliezer said. So Hani Chal Rava, this is good according to Rava. The Amar Rava says in Imam Nachman, the machloket is keshenirbe'u keshen mugdashin. The machloket between Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer is only going to be when the mothers were nirbe'u, when they were already sanctified. Aval keshehen chulin, but when they're going to be chulin, the divra kol according to everybody, it's going to be mutarin. Meaning, even if it was that the mother was nirbe'ah from this goy beforehand 5 years ago, it's chulin. So since it's chulin, there's no problem afterwards with the children. The children that come out from this animal, you're allowed to come and bring as a korban. Ella l'Ravuna bar Chinana, but according to Ravuna bar Chinana and Rav Nachman, the machlokes is keshen yirbu, keshen chulin. Aval keshen mugdashin, according to everybody, it's going to be asurim. So Michael, what are you going to say then? So the Gemara says, Eima, you're right. They watched over the mother from the time that it was born. Meaning they made sure that the mother was never nirbeah. Not only the paraduma. Paraduma's mother, right? So fine. So ask the Gemara, says, right, we're going to go to the grandmother then. Answers the Gemara, kulai lo chashina. We're not going to, meaning we can't go 5, you can't go up, right? Meaning that it's already just enough that in itself, right? Which one? So it comes out, right? He says over here, you don't have to do it. Here he wants to say it's a kodem shnitabra lechashina bizayon. There's a whole thing here, but okay, you don't have to suspect that high. Okay, so says the Gemara, right? 1 second, right? Amar mor Yisrael mishamim to mishat shenotzra. So the first one was that from the time that it was notzar, the Bnei Yisrael are going to be watching over this paraduma. Menayadinan. How do you know when it was notzar? So Amar Rav Kana says kos adom avirin lefanea b'shah she'oleh olah zachar. Do you know how do they make a paraduma? You know how they make a paraduma? When the male is having relations with the female, right? In order to get the paraduma, they bring a kosadom. They bring a red cup in front of it. So he sees it, right? The female. Yeah, the female sees it, right? And that causes that it's going to have a red child. Exactly. Yaakov with the Makalivin, exactly. With all the, yes, 100%. Yeah. So he says, if so, amai damei yekorim. So why behemet is it going to be so expensive? Yeah, why is it going to be so expensive then? Everyone could do that. So he says, no. You know how difficult it is? Because remember, it's not just putting, you could do it 100 times, but the percentages are going to be so low because all you need is 2 black hairs out of the entire body, and it becomes pasul. So 2 black hairs, that's it. So he says, so says the Gemara, yeah, what's the difference then from their parot? Right? If behemet you could start doing these things, do it. Amar Rav Kahana says, b'muchzeket. Right? The mishpachat parot of Dama Benetina, they have a chazakah, it's like a redhead. Right? Nowadays also, there's this, redheads, you understand? But even redheads, right, they could still have something of here's they had a chazakah that they were able to have the red cows, the red heifers. So because of that, so therefore they went and they were able to do these things. But really, this concept, if you remember, we already brought this down. You remember we brought it down. So says the Gemara, right? It's muchzeket. So Yativ, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Akila. So it once happened that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha were inside of a traklin. It was right before the traklin. This is the entrance to the ballroom, right? This is a kil'ah. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Patach chad minayu. And one of them said, V'amad, וכן היה רבי אליעזר פוסל. Rabbi Eliezer was posel bechol hakorbanot kulan, and all the korbanot. Patach idach minau. So the other one said, "V'amar, mai otivu li le chavrohi." What did they answer the Chachamim Rabbi Eliezer? Right, that basically that when he paskin the Rabbi Emav the Videk Chovim is pasul lakrava. So he said, "Kol tzon kedar yikavtzu lach, right? Yalu leratzon amizbechi." Amar le'en Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Eliezer, "Kulam gerim grurim him." Says all the Videk Chovim are nigrarim, right? Lidgayer latilavo. Meaning in the future, all the Videk Chovim they want to come to convert, and therefore in the future, all their animals will also be able to bring blood, because since they're going to be converting. So for now, you could bring their animals. So Amar of Yosef says it of Yosef, Maikra. How do we know that? He says in a pasuk in Sefanya, Ki haze pochel amim safa v'rura, likro kulam b'shem Hashem, ulovdo shechem echad. He says, then all the nations will come to Hashem. So it's mashma, they will come to be mitgayer. So Elmaleh Abaye says, Abaye v'dilma me'avdei kochavim hu de'haduber. He says, maybe they're not going to convert. Maybe it just means that they're not going to... Maybe it just means that they're not going to do Avodah Zarah. So says the Gemara, Amalei Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, le'ovdo shechem echad ktiv. Meaning, even though the beginning it says, Az epoch lamim safa v'rura, likro b'shem Hashem, but it also says, le'ovdo b'shem echad, which means that they're going to come and they're going to convert. Rav Papa matniach, Rav Papa, he had another version. The other version was as follows. Rav Zvid matniach, Rav Zvid, he taught like this, right? That basically Rabbi Yami, Rabbi Tzon Nafcha were sitting together. But Tarvayu Amri, both of them said, that Rabbi Eliezer posel, that Rabbi Eliezer was posel and all the korbanot. Tarvayu Amri, both of them said, what is his friends going to tell Rabbi Eliezer? The kol son kedar yikavzulach. Amar, says Rabbi Eliezer, kulam gedrin grulim nati lavo. Umaykra, what's the pasuk? Ki az epoch alamin safa v'rura likro kulam b'shem Hashem. So matkif Rav Yosef. Here Rav Yosef asked the question. V'dilma me'avodat kochavim u'dehadru be. Maybe they're only just retracted from avodat kochavim. Because before it was a matter of Yosef. Rav Yosef was bringing a proof. Now it's as a question. So the Gemara answers, right? Elmaleh Abaye answers him, Lovdo shechem echad ktiv. It's written Lovdo shechem echad. Fine. Meitvei. So we're going to ask the following question to Rabbi Eliezer. Vayomer Moshe gam ata titem yadem zvachim olot. You remember that Moshe Rabbeinu, he went and he told Paro, not only are we going to go and build a wall, yeah, but they are going to pay for it. Yeah? What does that mean? Not only are you going to come and you were going to take korbanot to bring sacrifices, you're going to give us the sacrifices. Paro be'atzmo. So now 1 second. How could that be? That's what you just told me, that you're not allowed to take from a goy. Answers the Gemara, Kodem Matan Torah Shane. Before Matan Torah, it's permitted. Yeah? Before Matan Torah? Fine. Another question. Yitro took it. So says the Gemara, Yitro nami kol Matan Torah. Yitro was also before Matan Torah. So says the Gemara, Hanich Lamandamar. That's good according to the Mandamar. Yitro kol Matan Torah, that he was before Matan Torah. But according to the Mandamar, Kavdale Damubet 24b, to be or not to be? That's the question. If you're on your phone, you're never going to be. Right? So he says, Yitro le'achar Matan Torah. Hava. So Michael Amemar. So if you're going to tell me that Yitro was after Matan Torah, but there's a machloket, when was Yitro? Before or after Matan Torah? So therefore, what are you going to say? Ela Yitro Misrael Zavan. He says Yitro, he bought the animals, right, from Israel. So therefore, since he bought it from Israel, everything came from Israel. So Tashema. So they're going to bring another pasuk now. Vayomer Shaul me'amaleki aviu asher chamal ha'am al metav atzon v'bakar. Right, leman zevuach l'Hashem Elokecha. You remember that Shaul HaMelech, he lost the kingdom. When did he lose the kingdom? He lost the kingdom because he didn't listen to Hashem, he listened to the people. When you listen to what people want instead of listening to Hashem, so you lose everything, right? And that's exactly what happened, because usually many times the people will come and they'll tell you something, and they think that they're doing it for good kavanah, and they're kulam kodesh kodashim, and everything that you want, and really it's pasul, v'pasul, v'pasul, 3 times pasul, right? So what happened? The people come and they told him, what are you going to come and you're going to kill the animals? And what are you going to... So Shaul HaMelech, he thought he was doing a favor to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he comes and he's thinking he's doing a very big mitzvah. So the big mitzvah is, instead of coming and killing the animals, I'm going to save the animals and we're going to bring them as korbanot. So that's what he comes and he tells Shemuel Hanavi. And Shemuel Hanavi comes and he tears his clothing and he told him, you were not Mekayem Divrei Hashem, you went against Divrei Hashem. Why? Hashem doesn't need your korbanot. Hashem doesn't need your things. He wants you to listen to his voice. So what happened? Here, Shaul HaMelech comes and he says that I kept the animals. Why? Leman zevuach l'Hashem lokecha. Now, 1 second. Where did the animals come from? From the Amalekim. So how are you bringing it as a korban? So answers the Gemara, my metav atzon ve'abakar, deme metav. We're talking about the money of the animals for korbanot. We're not talking about the actual animals in itself. We're going to be brought for korbanot. Hurotzat kesef, v'akesef אתה יכול להשתמש בשביל korbanot. So ask the Gemara, umay shna metav. So why do you need the best? Metav means the best of the animals. Obviously, if you're going to tell me it's for korbanot, אתה צריך krem l'krem, right? You have the best of the animals. But if you're going to tell me it's in order to sell it and then you're going to get the money in order now to use for korbanot, so why do you need the best of the animals? So answers the Gemara, he says, in order to what? That they should jump on it to get the money. Meaning, if it's a good animal, people are going to run to buy it. If it's not a good animal, people are not going to run to buy it. Another question, Tashema. He says, ויאמר הרבנה אל דוד, ייקח ויעל אדוני המלך הטוב בעיניו, כלי הבקר לעולם המורגים וכלי הבקר לעצים. Basically, David HaMelech comes and he brings this animals of an Oved Kochavim as a korban. Because the Ravna comes and he tells David, right, come, take whatever you want. So again, how could he bring it? It comes from a non-Jew. So Amar Rav Nachman answers, Ravna was a Ger Toshavaya. He wasn't a complete goy. He was a Ger Toshav. Remember, once they mekabel Sheva Mitzvot Ben Noach, they're considered a Ger Toshav, right? And therefore, because why? Because one of the Sheva Mitzvot Ben Noach is Gilui Rayot, so therefore they cannot have relations with the animal, right? So he says, okay, so my morigim, what does it mean now morigim? Amarula mita shel turbil. He says over here, it's a utensil. So amarula mita shel turbil, right? Or my mita shel turbil, iza de kurs kesata is shan. So there is bal shinaim shadash, which means it's a very big piece of wood, right? Like a luach gadol, that is very, very thick. And at the bottom they had, right, charitzim amukim, which are close to each other, right? So therefore they had like, and therefore this was put on the tevuah, and that's how they used to thresh. It's like, like nowadays they do it the bed of nails, right? So it's something very, very similar. It's like a bed of nails. You never seen it? It's a bed of nails. You go on top of nails, and then you lie down on it, and all of a sudden everything will go down and makes a form. It's nails. So the same thing, but the opposite way down, meaning that it was like the nails, right? But downwards. And that machine, right? It was like a big luach. It was a big piece of, wood. And on the bottom, you had a whole bunch of pieces like this of, like nails, if you want to call them, right? And then when they used to thresh, they used to use that for the threshing. Okay, so Amar of Yosef says of Yosef, Maika, how do we know this pasuk? Inesamticha lemorag charutz chadash bal pifiyot, tadu sharim betadok, ugvaot kamos tasim. Okay, fine. So Meitvei, so we're going to ask another question then again against Rabbi Eliezer. Ve'et parot elu ola la Hashem. They're going to bring the parot as an olah to Hashem. Here we're talking about the Anshe Bet Shemesh. They came, and this is again when they got back the Aron from the Eretz Pelishtim. Again, they brought the korbanot from the Goyim. So how could they do that? And so the Gemara Hodat Sha'aita. It was a one-off. Meaning usually you're not allowed to do it. Here was a one-off. So says the Gemara Achinam Mistabra. It's actually even logical to say so. If not, Ola Nekeva Miika. There they brought parot, which was females. An olah is always from a male. And the olah only comes from mina zachar, right? The chatat, right, was the female, but the olah is mina zachar. So he says, umay kushia. Says the Gemara, one second. What's the proof? He says, Dilma bebamat yachid. Maybe it was talking about bamat yachid. Remember that before the Bet HaMikdash, right, you had the mishkans, correct? Before the Bet HaMikdash, for how many years? What? You have to add a zero at the end. 480. Right? From the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim until the first Bet HaMikdash, it was 480 years, until Shlomo Melech built the Bet HaMikdash. But, right, what happened was, right, it's true, you have it there. Yeah? He says, but what happened is that, okay. Yeah, 480 years. So they said, right? So they said like this. They said that during this time they had Bamat Yachids. Remember that once they had the Bet HaMikdash, you're not allowed to make a Bamat Yachid anymore. But when they didn't have the Bet HaMikdash, you were able to do a Bamat Yachid. So Bamat Yachid means a private barbecue. You remember we spoke about this many times. Right? Your own private mizbeach. So he says over here, maybe it's talking about a Bamat Yachid. Bamat Yachid, you're allowed to bring an Ola Nekeva. Uchta Ravada Barava. The Amar Ravada Barava says Ravada Barava. Minan le'Ola Nekeva shikshera Bamat Yachid. How do we know that an Ola Nekeva is going to be kosher on a Bamat Yachid? Shneimar says the pasuk vayikach Shemuel telech halav echad v'yaleh Ola. But Shemuel is going to take a telech halav echad and he's going to bring it up as an Ola. So you see from here, right, that it's there's no raya that it's maybe it's a child even without that. He says v'yalehu zachar mashma. Says no, but when it says v'yalehu, it's mashma that it was a zachar, because if not, it would have been written v'yaleh ha. That's a female. So Rav Nachman say, yeah, but it's written v'yaleh ha. That's what it's written. Sorry, we read it v'yalehu, but really be'emet it's written v'yaleh ha. So that's why we say that it was going to be a female. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan says, right, Gvul yeshla. Do you know a be'ema, he's got a zman katsuv in order that it's going to be ne'ekeret, as a reviyah. Pechuta mi bat shalosh shanim ne'ekeret. Bat shalosh shanim ve'elach ena ne'ekeret. Meaning, if it's going to be less than 3 years old, it becomes an akara. He says, after bat shalosh shanim, ena ne'ekeret. Yeah? So it's something incredible. Yeah? So he says over here like this. He says, right? So therefore, right, we came and we asked, right, a stira basically between the Mishnah, because you said that, they're going to be suspecting on Reviyah, and all of a sudden the Braita says you're allowed to buy the animals from them, and we're not going to suspect for Reviyah. So what's going on? So Rav came and he answered that Rovei Kochavim is not Reviyah Bemto, because he doesn't want it to become sterile. And if it's going to become sterile, so therefore that's it. It's going to lose his own animals. So because of that, even if we're going to suspect that there's going to be Reviyah with a Jew putting his animal by the Goy, but not of the Goy's animals himself. Nevertheless, the Gemara comes in and is going to make a differentiation. What are the ages when it's going to become an akara or not? So eitve kol hani tiyufta. So again, we're going to ask on Rabbi Yochanan all the questions that we asked until now. All the psukim that it's mashma, that you're allowed to bring the animals of the Kochavim for akrava. So answers the Gemara, shanilu pechutam bat shalosh shanim. He says, no, all these cases, the animal was less than 3 years old. So since the female was less than 3 years old, that's why it's permitted. Because the goy will never do it, because he knows that by doing reviyah, he's going to cause that now, right, he won't be able to have any more children. And therefore, that's one of the things that he needs, obviously. So the Gemara is going to speak about one of them. Tashema, ve'et aparot. He says, what does it mean, ve'et aparot? We're talking about this is from the Eretz Plishtim, right? Elu ola la'Hashem. Again, we're talking about less than 3 years old. So matkifla Ravuna Rav Natan, in Ken, if so, haynu v'yichu shte parot olot menikot v'yasur bagala ve'benehen kalu b'bayit. He says these parot already have children. So now he says a para pechutam bat shalosh shanim mi kayalda, it cannot have a child. But now we learned in a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Bechorot says para hamor bat shalosh, meaning a para hamor, in order for it to have a child, it has to be minimum of 3 years old. So if it's 3 years old, and you just told me that it becomes an akar, right? If it's going to be after 3. So he says, Vadaila Kohen, this Vlad for sure is going to go to the Kohen, because for sure it did not give birth beforehand. Mikam Vailach, after that, it's going to be a safek, because maybe it already had a child, or not, you don't know. Meaning, before 3 years old, you know for sure there was no child. Okay? So says the Gemara, Ela machvarta, but rather the real tirutz is like what we said at the beginning, that they did bring the parot as alpi hora'at sha'ah. Hora'at sha'ah means it was a one-off time, and therefore that's what we brought it. So Kakadosh, we're on Kavdal Mubet 24b, the 2 dots, right, towards the, let's say 2 quarters, let's say 2/3 down the page. Okay, Vayisharna parot baderech al derech bet shemesh. So we're talking about now again, when we're talking about that they're bringing the Aron, right, to Bet Shemesh. So it says, what does it mean Vayisharna now? So he comes and he says as follows. Vayisharna is mashma yashar. Samar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Meir, Shamru, right, Shira. They said Shira. Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia Amar, Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia says the name of Rav, Shishru pneim keneged Aron v'amru shira. They put the parot, they put their faces keneged Aron, and they said, right, shira, meaning either the first explanation was that the parot said shira, right? So that's why Yisharna is Milashon Shira, right? Singing. So it's Kiru that the Parot said the Shira, or Shishru, they put their faces straight, Keneged Aron, and they said Shira. Okay? So he says, Umay Shira Amru. What Shira did they say? Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Meir, Az Yashir Moshe, Uvnei Israel. Yeah, they said the Shira. They sang our Shira. Rabbi Yochanan did that. Rabbi Yochanan himself said, no. V'amartem bayom hahu, hodu la Hashem, you Yishmo. They said Hodu. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar, Mizmora Yatma. The Mizmor Ayatom. What does that mean, Mizmor Ayatom? Right? That it's not written who said it. That's why it's Mizmor Yatma. Mizmor Shiru Lashem Shechedash Nuzah, Odi Oshiel Yumino, Zorah Kodsho. That's why it's called the Mizmor Ayatom. Yeah? We don't know who said it. Okay, this is Rashi. Also, they ask on that. Okay, fine. Mizmor Todah, Mizmor Shalim Shabbat. There's a few of them. But okay, fine. So he comes and he says, right? Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar. Oh, sorry, we just did that one. Right? Rabbi Lazar Amar. Rabbi Lazar says, Hashem Malach Yirgizu Amim. Rabbi Shimon Nachmani Amar. Hashem Malach Geul Avesh. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Amar. Roni Hashita, which means, right? The Aron is out of Atzeh Shitim. Hitznofefi, right? Bring yourself up. Berova Dorech. Right? Amchusheket berikme zahav, which is covered with zahav on the inside and outside. Hamullah bedvir armon, which is going to be meular with the Sefer Torah, which is that's what's written inside of it. Umfoarim ba'adi adaim, and it doesn't have takshitim gedolim mizeh. You don't have any other takshitim bigger than this. Meaning that they were saying like a song. It was like this is what they were saying, a new song. Meaning until now they were saying songs that it's already written. Whether it's the Shira, which is in the Torah, or all the other ones which are written in Tehillim, each one is written. The sixth Shita, which is Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, they actually sang a song. They invented a song. There's a word for it. Yeah, composed. Yeah, that's what it is. Composed, no? That's what he said. Composed the song. Ravashi matnilad Rabbi Yitzchak Ahas. So Ravashi, he actually taught this of Rabbi Yitzchak, but they composed a song for this. Because it says, Vayibin Su'arom Vayom Moshe Kuma Hashem, Yisrael Mayamru. What does that mean that it says Vayibin Su'arom Vayom Moshe? Moshe was the one that said Kuma Hashem. What did Yisrael say? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says Yitzchak Roni Ashita. That's what Bnei Yisrael said. Okay. Amar Rav says Keman Karu Parsai LeSafra Devir. With which Mekor do they call the Parsim? They call a Sofer, right? A Sefer. They call it a Devir. Right? So he comes and he says, how do you know that they use David for a Sefer? So he says, Mehacha, V'shem David, Lefanim Kiryat Sefer. So therefore the David, right, is actually going to be a Sefer. Ravashi says, Keman Karu Parsai Lenida Dashtana. Why do they call it Nida? They call her Dashtana. Why do they call her that? Mehacha, Ki Derech Nashimli. Derech Nashimli is Dashtana. You're right? Dalet for Derech, Shin for Nashim. So derech nashimli dashtana, right? See, yes. So he says that's how we know, right, that it's called that. Meaning they took it from these different words, yeah. And then vayidom Hashemesh, obviously, and we'll continue for this B'ezrat Hashem.